This 767 is huge.
It is pretty cool.
The Wright brothers first flew 114 years ago this month, and man, have things changed.
Things have changed, but you would be surprised about how much of this airplane is descended from the original Flyer. The basics of flight haven't really changed.
Beth, this is our flight. We've got to go.
How long do we have?
About 30 minutes. This is STEM in 30. This
Is STEM in 30. Hi, I'm Beth.
And I'm Marty, and today we are coming to you live from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum's Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia. But we are not in the museum today.
Not today. We are in a United Airlines 767. Today we're going to take a look at the airplane's family tree, beginning with the Wright brothers, all the way up to modern day jets.
This jet is incredibly cool. It cruises at around 40,000 feet, flies over 500 miles an hour, and has over 90 miles of wiring inside.
The first airplane flew only about 102 feet. It's not even the wingspan of this airplane.
We'd like to welcome our friends from St. Timothy Catholic School who are joining us today. They have their seat backs and tray tables in the full and upright position, and they have got some great questions ready to go before departure.
And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can post a question in the comment section.
We will get to as many of those on the show today as we can.
Now, a lot has changed in the airplane's family tree, but it might surprise you about what has actually stayed the same.
When the Wright brothers began their aeronautical research, they realized that an airplane is not just one invention, but it's many inventions, all of which have to work together to have a successful airplane. Today we call that a technological system, but in the Wright brothers' day, they just realized that they needed to develop all of these separate components to have a successful airplane. Of course, you need a set of wings or some sort of lifting surface to get you into the air. You need to have a control system to control the airplane once you're flying. Also, you need a propulsion system to keep you going through the air. And of course, a lightweight and strong structural design was important to get an airplane to fly. So they focused on all of those elements to create a successful airplane. They also created the idea that you needed to have the pilot as part of the airplane, that the pilot is part of the system. So teaching themselves to fly was another aspect of their invention of the airplane. Now, if they were to walk into a modern aeronautical engineering lab today, there'd be a lot of things that would be new to them, but in fundamental ways, they'd be quite comfortable with what they're seeing, because their airplane incorporates all the basic ideas that every airplane that flew after that incorporates. Again, an idea of a lifting surface, a propeller for propulsion, an engine, a good control system, and those basic elements are just like a modern airplane today.
I'm joined by United Airlines pilot Julie Callens. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Now, the Wright brothers were self-trained pilots. I imagine your training's a little bit different.
It is a little bit different. I have a 4-year degree from a university in Ohio, a Bachelor of Science in Technology, and each airline that I've worked for since graduating from college has its own rigorous training. At United, where I've been a pilot for 21 years, each time that we transition to a different airplane type, it's about 6 weeks of training, and what we like to say is it's a year of college all crammed into 6 weeks.
Now, what got you interested in flying?
It's kind of a funny story, but when I was 15, I was growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was a huge baseball fan. And my parents had taken me to an Indians game, and they noticed that during the baseball game, I was watching the Blue Angels fly overhead rather than watch the baseball game, which was rather unusual for me. So the following day, my parents took me to the air show, and I was hooked. I got to talk to a number of pilots. I actually talked to a friend of my dad's who was a United pilot. He took me up on a small airplane, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
And so your first flight, you were pretty young.
I was 15.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's
yeah.
big, yeah, so
yeah.
you really do love it.
I do.
So The Wright brothers developed the airplane, and the pilot was an integral part of that design. Now today we hear about all the new technologies and autopilot, but I imagine you're still pretty integral to flight.
Yeah. The way that I'd like to explain it is, if you look at cars and all the safety advancements that have been made in cars in the last even 5 or 6 years, everything from sensors that go off to tell you you're changing lanes to GPS, all these things are safety, but it hasn't replaced the driver. Right. Airplanes are much the same way. We've now got so much technology in the cockpit, things that alert us to other airplanes in the area, the autopilot, anything from ground proximity to wind shear warnings, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't replace the pilot.
You ready to take some questions?
I'm ready.
Let's take an online question first. Do airplanes use hydraulic systems?
Airplanes do use hydraulic system. Each airplane is a little bit different, but most airplanes, most airliner type airplanes use hydraulics for things like raising and lowering the landing gear, operation of all the flight controls, brakes, steering the airplane.
Let's try a video question.
How did the Wright brothers' bicycle help to create their first airplane?
The Wright brothers built bikes before they built planes. And one of the ways they understood how a plane was going to work is that a bicycle is a very unstable machine. If you aren't riding it, it'll fall over, but very controllable. An airplane is pretty much the same way. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the things that the Wright brothers learned was that when you're riding a bicycle, you lean, which is our version of yaw. And their very first airplane had wing warping, which meant that as you wanted to turn the airplane, you'd actually change the entire shape of the wing. We do much the same to this day with ailerons, and it just changes the shape of the wing, and each of the control surfaces helps to maintain a stable airplane.
Let's take one of our audience questions.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Ryan Domingos, a Washington Dulles space flight attendant here at United Airlines, and our first question comes from Sophia. Sophia, what's your question?
How do pilots avoid hitting birds during takeoff and landing?
Great question, Sophia. So I'd love to say it's 100% foolproof and we can always avoid birds, but unfortunately sometimes birds just don't hear us coming. So 99.9% of the time birds get out of the way, and you can see them coming, and generally they fly away, but on occasion birds do hit the windshield. Our windshields are actually heated, so if you think of something hitting a cold surface, the cold surface is probably going to shatter. One of the reasons why our windshields are actually heated is so that if we do come in contact with a bird, it creates a large splat, but it does not destroy the windshield.
Okay, we have another online question. How do planes fly safely in bad weather?
Again, it comes down to technology, all these advancements that we've been talking about. Now we've got truly state-of-the-art weather radar that helps us see and detect thunderstorms from 80, 120, 160 miles away. Avoidance is the key. We generally try and stay 25 miles or greater from all thunderstorms. Wow. Air traffic control is a great resource also. They will tell us that they see that there is a thunderstorm or some weather up ahead, and do we want to go left or right or climb or descend to try and get around it.
Okay. We have another audience question.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Patty Erickson. I'm Washington, D.C. based flight attendant. We have a question from Malcolm today.
How much force can a plane's wings take, and is it different for different types of planes?
Good question, Malcolm. Yes, it is different for different types of airplanes. So some of the fighter airplanes that you might see in the Air and Space Museum can exceed 8, 9, 10 Gs. An airplane like this, a modern day transport, is generally about 2.
Okay. We have another audience question.
Yes, our next question comes from Kathleen. Kathleen, what's your question?
What are some of the major differences between the engines of older planes versus newer planes?
Thanks, Kathleen. The newer airplanes have engines, number one, if you look back into the Wright brothers' times with the propellers, so we're now talking about jet airplanes, but the newer jet type airplanes, they're much more energy efficient, much like cars, but they're much more energy efficient, they're quieter, and they have better performance.
Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem.
When the Wright brothers were developing their plane, they used gliders to do some testing. And one of their final gliders that they built, they realized that there was some problems actually in the lift. So they did their own testing to figure out what those issues were.
When the Wright brothers began designing their first gliders, they used aerodynamic data they acquired from other people. But after the performance of the gliders in the field was not what their calculations predicted, they decided they needed to gather their own aerodynamic data, and they did that by building a wind tunnel. Now, they didn't build the first wind tunnel, but they built the first wind tunnel that was specifically designed to get that aerodynamic data that they needed to design their glider. And in late 1901, they conducted tests on dozens and dozens of different wing shapes, different curvatures, different planforms, and zeroed in on what they thought would be the most efficient shape. And they used that in their third glider in 1902, and the performance improved dramatically, and they really had a true airplane.
All right, we're joined by United Airlines flight attendant Philip. Philip, thanks for talking with us.
Hi, everyone.
Philip, you fly a lot. What's
I
the
do.
best part of each flight?
I still have to say it's the miracle of flights, the takeoff, lifting up from the ground and looking out in the beautiful view. Still my favorite part.
Awesome. There's not much that's better than that feeling when you first lift up off the ground. But have you ever wondered, how do you get a giant airplane like this up in the air? Our students from St. Timothy are going to help me with a little demonstration here. Now, they've all got a strip of paper in front of them that we're going to use, but you can do this on your flight. You can ask your friendly flight attendant for a napkin, or you could just take a dollar bill out of your pocket. Do you have a dollar bill that I could borrow? Awesome, thank you. So you can take your dollar bill or your strip of paper or your napkin, and what you're going to do is you're going to blow right over the top of it, just real fast, and what that's going to do is it's going to create faster moving air and low pressure. Air pushes down on us all the time. That's pressure. We want to create some faster moving air and some low pressure. So hold these up underneath your bottom lip and blow over them and see what happens. We see that those strips of paper or dollar bills, they kind of lift up into the air and they move around. What we've done is we've created that low pressure, which in turn creates lift and lifts that strip of paper up into the air. But let's do something that maybe you can't do on a flight. So let's bring out some toilet paper here, if you'll grab that for me. All right, so we've got some toilet paper and it's just kind of hanging off here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blow across the top of it. And you see it lifts that toilet paper up in the air. Again, low pressure creating that lift. I think we should probably supercharge this a little bit.
I think we should.
All right, so what I've got here is, I've got a leaf blower. Now they looked at me kind of funny when I came through security with this today, but it's all in the name of science. So let's see what happens when I blow some really fast moving air over the top of the toilet paper and create that low pressure and that lift. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah. That is some science awesomeness. That is the Bernoulli principle that says that when you create faster moving air, you get low pressure. And when you get that low pressure, you create lift. Now, we've talked about how to get a big airplane like this into the air, but what about what happens once the airplane is in the air? How does it move? Be ready for your pre-flight science briefing.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We request your full attention as we demonstrate how to control this aircraft. For sustained, controlled flight, an airplane must be able to roll, pitch, and yaw. All passengers, please stand up with your arms to your sides as if they were wings. The flight attendant will now come through the aisle to check your wingspan. Roll is rotation around the front to the back axis. Imagine you have a big stick going through an airplane from the front to the back. This is the axis. Everyone roll along this axis. There is another axis that goes wingtip to wingtip. Pitch is the rotation around this axis. Everyone pitch. The third axis goes from the top of the plane to the bottom. Yaw is the rotation around this vertical axis. Everyone yaw. To do these movements, the plane has control surfaces, which are parts of the airplane that move. Ailerons are on the wings and roll the plane. What happens when we move the ailerons? Elevators are on the tail, and they pitch the airplane. So when we move the elevators, what happens? Finally, there's yaw. Yaw is controlled by the rudder on the tail of the plane. Let's see what happens when we move the rudder. Now please put your arms down, have a seat, relax, and the next time you're flying, be sure to pay attention during your flight for roll, pitch, and yaw.
One thing that connects the Wright Flyer to today's airplanes is that they both controlled roll, pitch, and yaw. One of the big differences, though, is the complex cockpit on a modern airplane. I got a chance to talk to a United Airlines pilot inside the cockpit of a 787 Dreamliner to talk about those control surfaces and how they control an airplane. As you watch this, listen for the terms roll, pitch, and yaw. I'm joined by Kyle Whitaker, and we're in the cockpit of a 787 Dreamliner. Tell us what these controls do.
Well, much like even a much smaller airplane, you have a yoke, which is how we kind of control our pitch. If you push forward, the nose will go down. You pull back, the nose will come up. Also, just like in a smaller aircraft, turn left, the ailerons will move and it'll cause the aircraft to roll to the left, or if you turn to the right, it'll cause the aircraft to roll to the right. Also, these are our what we call thrust levers, or these kind of our engine controls. You push them forward, the engines will rev up and create more thrust and allow the aircraft to move forward. And if you pull them back once you're in flight, it'll allow the aircraft to slow down. Also down on the floor are rudder pedals. You push them to the left and the aircraft will yaw to the left. And if you push the right pedal, it'll yaw to the right.
Okay, tell me what this is.
It's a heads-up display. So what it does is it takes information from the navigation computers down here and puts it up here so you can always be focused outside of the window.
The Wright brothers didn't have a cockpit. Why such a complex cockpit?
Well, I'll tell you what, they weren't traveling at 39,000 feet and almost 550 miles an hour.
If you were to take the Wright brothers and put them in here, and the technology is a little bit different, do you think they'd understand what was going on?
I think they might be able to get the basics, but with a little training, they could definitely fly a 787.
Is it fun to fly?
It's a blast. Best job in the world. Lots of fun.
Outstanding. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
I am joined by United Airlines flight attendant Wally Coates. Wally, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Now, when the Wright brothers built their plane, it was pretty much a pilot and then later a pilot and a passenger.
Yes.
Today things are a little different. You take a lot more passengers and we have to think about their safety. So I'm going to guess that your job is more than just serving drinks.
Absolutely. Your safety is our primary concern. You know, without that, we might as well not be here. So we do everything we can to keep you as safe as possible from start to finish.
How did you get interested in this job?
Ever since I was little, I've always been interested in flying and transportation. I used to take the metro over to National Airport, sit on the platform and watch airplanes take off and land. So this is actually a dream come true.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your training was to become a flight attendant?
Training consists of 7 weeks, primarily safety, and we also get aspects of service involved. It's really intense. It's pretty much pass or fail. So in order to make it this far, you have to really study hard.
Ready to take some questions?
I am.
Let's start with an online question. How long did it take the Wright brothers to make their airplanes? This one I know.
All right.
The Wright brothers actually started with a kite, and it took them from that kite to the development of their airplane about 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it took them a while, and they did a lot of testing. Let's take a video question.
What material did the Wright brothers use to make the first airplane?
The Wright brothers used wood, wire, and cloth to make their first airplane. This airplane's a little different. What's this made out of?
Pretty much aluminum.
But there's also plastic pieces in here.
Right, it's a lot of composite materials that make up the entire aircraft.
And I guess it's sturdy but light?
The aluminum makes it a lighter weight material, so in doing that, we remain more fuel efficient.
Okay, let's take an audience question.
Our first question is from Eva. Eva, what's your question?
When the first commercial planes were developed, were people afraid to fly them?
The first commercial planes, were people afraid to fly?
I would imagine so. You know, with new technology, there's always a little question of if it's going to work, if it's not. So you just have to have a little bit of faith, and things usually come through.
One of the things that I do know is one of our airplanes at the museum is called the Ford Trimotor, and they decided to employ nurses as flight attendants
Yes.
in order to make people feel safer on these first flights. Let's take another audience question.
Hi, I have Georgia that has a question for you, Wally.
What causes turbulence?
What causes turbulence?
A lot of weather conditions up in the air. There's clouds, there's just mixtures of air, just different weather conditions that don't necessarily reach the ground that we have to often fly through to get you from point A to point B.
So it's kind of like potholes in the road?
It could very well be described as such.
Let's take an online question. What can we do to ensure our safety during flights?
We ask that as you get on the airplane, you kind of look around and check your surroundings. You always want to know where the emergency exits are, but as we as flight attendants do our safety briefing, we ask that you just follow along so that you're as informed as we are.
Now, I've also heard of a trick that you should probably count your seats.
Absolutely. Should the aircraft encounter a smoke-filled cabin, you want to be able to know where your exits are without being able to necessarily see them. So as you take your seat, you look in front of you and behind you, count the number of rows to the nearest exit.
I think that's a good tip we should all remember.
Yes.
Let's have another audience question.
Our next question is from Clarice. Clarice, what's your question?
What are the similarities and differences between large and small planes?
I imagine you've had to work on very large planes and very small planes, and what
Yes.
is the differences for you?
Well, for the smaller planes, versus larger, the capacity, we're able to carry more passengers, obviously with a larger airplane. But as you notice, this particular airplane is a two-aisle airplane, and it's often referred to as heavy.
Heavy?
Yes.
Oh.
It just means it's a dual-aisle airplane.
Okay. Well, now we've taken a look at the Wright brothers airplane and modern jets, but NASA is working on new aircraft that could very well be the next branch on the airplane's family tree.
I'm joined by Dr. Nicholas Bohr, who works on the X-57, an all-electric airplane. Nick, thanks for talking with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So tell us what the X-57 is.
Certainly. The X-57 is an X-plane. It's an experimental aircraft, so it's not meant for production, but it's used to test out particular technologies. What we're testing out here is what we call distributed electric propulsion technology. We have all of these electric motors, there's 14 of them distributed all about the leading edge of the wing here.
Wow, and is this going to change the way airplanes are designed?
Absolutely. Much like with the introduction of, say, the jet engine, you really needed to change the way that airplanes look to take full advantage of the jet engine. You'll see they had to do things like sweep the wings back and fly them a little bit higher and faster where it made sense, where it normally didn't make sense to do that with propeller-driven aircraft. Likewise, we think with electric propulsion, in order to get a lot of the benefit from it, you want to be able to interact with the flow around the wing, which is why we have so many of what we call these high-lift propellers all along the wing.
So this may be the future of airplanes?
We sure think so.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking with us.
Absolutely.
Well, we are not just the National Air Museum. We're the National Air and Space Museum. And we have some pretty exciting news, don't we?
We do. Our friend astronaut Randy Comrade Bresnik comes back from outer space tomorrow. He spent 6 months on board the International Space Station, and he lands tomorrow.
Before Randy went up, he did some lessons and some videos with us to describe what his time in space might be like.
Check out ISS Science.
Hello, astronaut Randy Bresnik again. And landing in a space shuttle is really smooth. We glide down to Earth in the world's largest glider at 220,000 pounds, and we touch down ever so smoothly at about 200 miles an hour. Very smooth. Soyuz that I'll be landing in, now scheduled for December, be very different. We come in a capsule, which protects us from coming through the fiery part of the Earth's atmosphere. But then once we're inside the Earth's atmosphere, then we have the parachutes come out. So just like you would think when you're doing parachuting out of an airplane, that opening shock of the parachute is the first car crash we go through. Then we have the parachute start to slow us down, and then it rehooks to a different spot on the capsule, and there's another big perturbation and movement within the capsule. And then as we're coming down the parachute for about 10 to 15 minutes, just before landing, fractions of a second before landing, the soft firing jets fire, and then that softens our hit to the ground. Well, that's the second car crash we have. So everybody says, even though I haven't done it, it's a series of car crashes that you're in. But then once you're down on the ground, you're thankful to be back and happy to be ready to smell and feel and experiences all those wonderful senses that you don't get when you're living in a tin can on orbit.
Wow, that was excellent!
Randy will be coming home soon, and an important part of that trip will be to dissipate energy so he doesn't end up scrambled.
The Soyuz spacecraft Randy will be flying in will be slowed down by parachutes and rockets so that they dissipate all that energy and they don't explode.
This is also important if you're trying to land things like Mars rovers on other planets.
You can do the same thing in your classroom if you're not chicken.
What you need are your crew members, some eggs, and then just stuff so that you can build a spacecraft or a lander. So, shall we clear this off and build a space capsule?
Sounds good. All right, let's see how this goes on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1. Let's see. Let's get the scissors out here.
Yeah.
Excellent! It survived!
If you want to learn more, be sure to check out our lesson plans online.
And be sure to share them with us as well. We are excited to see your designs.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. We want to first thank our sponsor, United. They also provided us with this awesome studio today.
We'd like to thank the flight crew from United Airlines for joining us today. They were awesome. We'd also like to thank everybody that helped make this show possible today. Everybody that brought it in and works on our crew started at 4 in the morning, so we really appreciate it. We also thank you guys for watching.
It's been a long day. Thanks for watching.
STEM in 30 is the National Air and Space Museum's live, 30-minute television show that engages students in STEM topics. STEM in 30 is broadcast from the road and the museum, giving kids a chance to experience Smithsonian exhibits and artifacts firsthand. Join us for a hot air balloon ride, catapult off the deck of an aircraft carrier, or talk to an astronaut live from the International Space Station. Our in-studio audience participates in demonstrations, while students watching online can ask questions and we answer them live. STEM in 30 is a unique opportunity for students to see that science is everywhere and it's fun. We hope you can join us for STEM in 30.